We've got a series, and it is dubbed Union 101. I've got a great guest who was gracious to share his time over 3 episodes to give us the ins and outs, the insider information, if you would call it, of what it's like not just to work in a union, dispelling a few myths, but also sharing what you need to do if you and your fellow workers want to organize. Eric is a 15-year veteran grocery worker in UFCW8-Golden State, located in Northern California. He is also a local leader as he helps start the Local 8 Reform Caucus at what cost and works to support national UFCW reform with the Essential Workers for Democracy. We got 3 episodes for you. They are all informative. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you at the end. Welcome back to Outsider Information, 3 of 3 of this Insider Knowledge series, Union 101. Eric is back with us, and he is the host of Worker to Worker on the At What Cost YouTube channel. Promised you I wasn't going to ding it this time. If you're getting tired with us, I don't know why you clicked on this video, but if you did, that means you're a little bit interested, so we've got to bring this thing home in the best way possible. Eric, you know the drill. What is the drink of the episode?
We are wrapping it up with a cold glass of filtered water with ice, keeping it fresh, keeping it pure.
Easy, right? Okay, so we always do a story, and you are very dialed in to not just what's happening with your local, but the general stuff that's happening. For those who don't know, I am in their Discord channel, so I'm getting all the updates by proxy, and it is interesting to see the process from the back end. But what is a story or a clip that you've seen recently that has been a win for the labor movement?
Well, I would like to give a shout out to the Teamsters in Indiana at the Horseshoe Casino. They just recently came off strike. Shout out Teamsters. Uh, Dustin Roach, president down there, led the charge. But these guys, they went out on strike, the dealers of this casino, before having the union recognize their contract. So very similar to what Starbucks Workers United is doing right now. We've got working people that have built the solidarity and the courage to take collective mass action without the protection of their union contract and the union behind them. These are people that are trying to get their union recognized, and these companies are stonewalling and dragging their feet and refusing to bargain a contract. For Starbucks workers, it's been like 4 years. And so right now, there's like 150 Starbucks workers that are out on strike right now. I chose Horseshoe Casino because the casino just recently, like within the last couple days, agreed to recognize their union contract and bargain in good faith. So those workers are back to work. Unfortunately, the Starbucks workers are still out on strike, and that action continues to grow. They doubled their stores on Black Friday. I think they're up to like 120 or 150, and the company is still refusing to recognize these workers and recognize their action. So shout out to the Horseshoe Casino Teamsters and shout out to Starbucks Workers United for showing working people that courage and solidarity and worker power do not come from your union contract. They come from your willingness to take direct action.
So whether it's a Starbucks, an Amazon, we just had something pass in California that gave additional protections to rideshare drivers. There's a lot of energy and momentum happening. As we go into the new year, what does that speak to as it relates to the labor movement?
I think that you're absolutely right. And I would point to Sean Fain, the international president of the United Auto Workers, who took a stand last year and told organized labor across the country to start preparing for a general strike in 2028. And it's these types of conversations and these types of wins, like we saw with the Teamsters against UPS or the auto workers against the big three auto manufacturers with the rolling strikes. These workers are gaining big contracts and big gains in their lives, like beyond what we as normal working people imagine is even possible. And once we see that around the country, we are inspired and motivated to take action ourselves. And we as workers are not only doing this in isolation against our companies, we have begun forming national networks underground of workers from different unions, different states, different locals, different industries, all building power around this same idea that if we can get on the same page and act together, we can rebalance what has everybody is living through it has become an extremely extremely out of whack financial environment. There is wealth beyond imagination, while simultaneously homeless people and veterans are starving in the streets. And for me personally, I don't understand how anybody has to live without a house while simultaneously Katy Perry is being launched into outer space.
A lot more we could spend on that one for sure, but we got to give the people what they want. So we covered in episode 1 that a company can't legally prevent you from organizing. So on that, someone wants to organize, a group of workers want to organize. What is the first most important step?
Well, you guys got to once you decide that you want to organize, and there's enough people in your collective bargaining unit or your workplace that want to organize, you've got to get your authorization card signed. So this can be coming to a union like the UFCW or the SEIU and telling them that you would like to organize. They will give you authorization cards, which get signed and filled out by the potential union members stating that they would like to affiliate with said union. And if 30% of your workers, 30%, decide that that's something they want, the NLRB will enforce a legal union vote. So if you work in a place with 10 people, only 3 people need to want a union to force that vote. Unions will traditionally, so if you go with like the Teamsters or the UFCW, they will like to see something like 60 or 70% of authorization cards signed, just because once that process starts and you've notified the union that you're going to have an election, or the company that you're going to have an election, the union busting battle begins.
So that's where we get into, we'll call it the fun stuff, right? This is the runway to takeoff. What does that look like after you've got the authorization cards? What does a campaign look like? What happens when you announce the intention to unionize? Union busting is one of those things that people hear about, but it's a little different when it's happening to you. A lot of stuff I threw at you. So this is, again, your runway to take off.
So you guys have decided to unionize. You've got your authorization card signed. The NLRB is saying that there's going to be a union vote, and now you guys are all stuck in captive audience meetings. So you go to work, you clock on, and you're forced to sit down for 8 hours and listen to somebody give you a presentation about how a union will eliminate your ability to speak on your behalf and for yourself with the bosses. The bosses will start to tell you how we shouldn't have a third party involved in this conversation. I want to just talk to you. You and I can figure this out. Why get these guys involved? And a lot of the myths that you brought up in the first episode come back up again here. You want to pay your union dues to this union? Go ask them over at the chicken plant. They never even see their union rep. All of that stuff starts coming your way. And I would like to just point this out to everybody listening right now. Why would they ever say that stuff to you? Why would they ever discourage you from joining a union if it wasn't the best thing for you and the worst thing for them? I've said it a couple times in this conversation. We are always in an antagonistic relationship with the bosses. They're always trying to reduce us as a cost. Anything that they're saying to discourage you from gaining that power should be a big red flag, or actually a big green flag to you that you're on the right track. The more they're trying to bust you, the better it probably is going to be that you keep going. So you guys got to stick through that process. You guys have to make it through, and there's legislation and there's a lot of things that are trying to be put into law right now to help protect workers against that. Because like we talked about a second ago with Starbucks, it's been 4 years since they've signed their union authorization cards. They affiliated with their own union, they created it, and Starbucks continues to delay, continues to distract, continues to demoralize, and continues to divide. And there's not enough legal structure behind forcing them to come and bargain that contract, which is why you see the workers taking the action that they're taking now, withholding their labor. Um, we need to fix that. I think that that's something that we will continue to work on as a labor movement, is getting that codified into the law like the NLRB and NLRA. But for now, we have to deal with those tactics, which is another reason why unions want authorization cards signed in a super majority, because you might lose some people along the way. There might be some people that get pulled up into management. A really good tactic of these union busters is they find that person that's organizing the most people on the shop floor, and they give them a big cushy office job and a fat raise. Why would they do that if the cost of not doing that was going to be greater, unless the cost was going to be greater of not doing that. So something to be aware of there.
How do those defections or potential defections impact the movement?
And they can be very demoralizing, to be honest. But one thing that we do have to remember and we do have to rationalize is that a person that makes that decision, we're all struggling and we're all trying to survive and we're all trying to keep our heads above water. I suffered during our contract bargaining session with a lack of empathy towards people that were legitimately scared of what was going to happen if it didn't go right. And my first response was to try to scare them into, like, if you choose to scab or you choose to be a rat, like, I'm not going to be able to talk to you on the other side of this. You realize that that's the risk. And that was a big turnoff to a lot of my coworkers. That's not really the way to inspire. And what I would recommend instead is that we keep the emphasis and we keep the focus on maintaining our class solidarity, that we have to stick together as a group. If we don't, then we cannot win. We can't win as individuals. We all don't win as individuals. One or two of us does, but that leaves 98 of us left behind. And that's not the world that we're trying to create for the working class, for working people. So solidarity is the key. One of the ways we do that here in At What Cost is by meeting up regularly. We have weekly basketball games and monthly bowling tournaments, and that's a good way for us to stay in contact with our coworkers, to build that trust, build that rapport, and build those relationships so that when these moments do come and these bosses do try to pull these tricks, we're inoculated against it. They don't impact us, and we know we've got our brothers and sisters' backs in any fight that we have to take together.
It feels very sports centric. It feels very team, the way that you're talking about how everyone's organized. They're holding each other accountable. They are moving towards a common goal, which would be a win, right? A win would be making sure that there is labor peace. You don't have to worry about those stressors. And that's the end goal, right? Getting that contract. But the process to getting there is a lengthy one. What does that process look like getting there? And then ultimately, what does some of that negotiating look like during collective bargaining?
Sure. So after you get your authorization card signed, you still have to have your union election, and that only has to be a majority plus one. So in that workplace where you had 10 workers and three of them signed authorization cards, you get to your union election, you only need six people to sign on, and boom, you've got a union. The collective bargaining process begins by forming a bargaining committee. A lot of times, if you affiliate with like a bigger union like the UFCW or the SEIU, they've got bargaining professionals that can come in and help organize that. But if you're like my brother Logan up here, who organized his own union against Pepsi, the Pepsi Employees Association, that brother goes in there and sits down with Pepsi suits and bargains that contract by himself. And that there's a huge spectrum of involvement from, bargaining professionals to unions like UFCW Local 7. Shout out to President Kim Cordova and UFCW Local 7, who takes an open bargaining approach, which means that any rank and file member is allowed to be in that room. They're on the bargaining committee. If you get off work at 1:30 and bargaining started at noon, you can walk into the bargaining room and take a seat and witness all of the bargaining that's happening between the company's lawyers, actuaries, bargaining professionals, and the unions. And one cool thing about open bargaining in UFCW Local 7 is that if the company puts a proposal down on the table and you're in the room, you get to vote on that proposal passing or not passing. And that's worker power. That's democracy for a lot of people that um, don't experience that in their day-to-day life. You can imagine where that, like, how awesome that must feel to get to have a say in something like that. And that's a big reason why we're big proponents of open bargaining here At What Cost. We have a very closed bargaining, no involvement, no participation, no members in the room, no visibility in the bargaining. Our leader just comes out and says it's time to strike or it's time to vote yes, and we're expected to fall in line. So huge spectrum there, but there is legit negotiations happening either openly or in closed rooms where money might be changing hands, who knows. But on the other side of that comes your CBA, comes the document that has been agreed upon by the bargaining committee and then needs to be signed into being or ratified by you and your coworkers, the union membership. So that's the other lever of democracy that I mentioned, is ratifying your union contract. If they bring a contract out of that collective bargaining session that you don't agree with, you and your coworkers have the right and the ability to turn it down.
One thing that I kind of wanted to touch on. So the numbers are interesting, right? At 30%, I understand why. So in a lot of different voting apparatuses, it's that two-thirds majority that they go through. They don't usually do the simple 50, they do the two-thirds. So that some of the bigger unions to kind of advance things would want to say, we want to see 6 out of 10 just to feel more comfortable with it. That makes a lot of sense. But people are not a monolith. And there are people who are going to either not want this or remain on the outside. So if a union is formed, what about the individuals that don't want to be part of the union? Where do they sit on the scale?
Well, this is where me as a active union militant will have a disagreement with some people, and in fact, I have a disagreement with the NLRA because a lot of amendments have been made to the NLRA, including the Right to Work Act, which allows for states to consider themselves right to work states, and in those cases, uh, spaces like workplaces that have decided to unionize, they can't force the members to pay dues. You don't have to pay dues in a right to work state if you don't want to. You don't have to join the union if you don't want to. But, and this is where I think is not good for the labor movement in whole, the union contract still applies to you, and the union still has to enforce that contract with you. So then it becomes a really tricky incentive situation where why does the worker pay dues and join the union if they get all of the supposed protections of the union and of the contract? And that creates a really big divide between the workers that are working in the same place because to the myth that you brought up before, imagine being a dues paying union member and seeing your union rep constantly coming in to file grievances for and protect a non dues paying union member. So in states like that, there is really no consequence for the worker that chooses not to become a part of that, other than they are missing out on the worker power and the worker solidarity that we've been talking about throughout this entire series that is needed to actually impact meaningful change in your workplace. Half of your coworkers, or however many percentage of you guys are unionized, are going to be out there fighting, but by your choice to not participate, you're limiting your own personal and professional living and work standards by not adding your voice and adding your power to that body. Now, in states like California, that doesn't apply. So in the UFCW stores here, they're called closed shops. So if you've got a union contract in a Safeway, you have to join the union. It's not a matter of whether you want to or not. But that being said, you don't have to participate, and many people don't unfortunately, and just pay their dues and expect the return on service. So the biggest pain point is that if our goal is to uplift and rebalance the power for workers in our country, that does require all working people. And so which side are you on, I guess? Are you going to be a bootlicker? Or are you going to be a union brother and sister and join your family?
I got nothing to throw on top of that one, but we got three things to carry us out of this thing before we close out. What would you want to say as the overarching message for someone who doesn't like the U word or has some anti-union sentiment?
I would say that for even the people out there that don't like unions or agree with unions, even for them, their current working conditions are better than they would be if there were no unions. Unions improve the working and living conditions of all workers. Wages are where they are because union workers have demanded the wages that they get paid. And that has set the tone throughout history. Things like the 40-hour work week, overtime, weekends, no child labor, those are all fights that have been fought and won by union workers that all working people get to enjoy. And union workers know that. They have to be the first ones out the door. They know that. They are going to stand in front of the attacks that these corporations levy against all working people, and they are happy to take the blows and they are happy to take the hits because they know that the world that they're building on the other side is a better world for everybody, including the people that hate the U word. And I hope that you change your mind. I hope you find the common struggle. I hope you find the power in solidarity and join the working movement. You and your coworkers, if you're missing from this conversation, you are the missing piece. And the more people that wake up to that and join the working class that they're a part of and stop bootlicking billionaires that they have nothing in common with, the faster we will get to where we all want to be.
All right. Next one. How about for the individuals who are in places where things aren't great and organizing might be needed or necessary?
So if you're here on episode 3 and you started on episode 1, there's a lot of information that might seem really overwhelming. I would like to point you to resources, to people that are out there that are very willing to help and get involved, professional organizers, volunteers, working class people like myself that would spend any amount of time on a phone call or a Zoom call with you talking about these things. But there are very, very valuable and accessible resources out there. If you're interested in organizing your workplace, go to labornotes.org, go to Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. If you sign up on the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee website, a professional organizer will reach out to you within 48 hours and help you start thinking about and formulating the plan to organize your workplace. It is extremely possible. There's a very good chance that if you start having these conversations with your coworkers, you will find common struggle and common issues that you guys can organize around. Pay. I got a brother down in a Southern California local who organized around a deli fryer vent that had been broken for multiple years, and people were having to breathe the fumes of fryer grease that wasn't getting vented out of the deli. And they organized, signed a petition, marched on the boss, and the next day the fryer vent was fixed. There is no issue too small, and once you organize, there's nothing too big or outside of your reach as a working person.
So because Eric's a pro, 2 and 3 ended up getting combined. So I don't have a third one. So we're gonna roll out just a little bit early. But remember, this is a legal right. And everything that Eric has mentioned in the previous 3 episodes are all resources designed for anybody who wants them. So that's what this episode was for. That is among the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation. You want the labor to win because all of us, when we are at will, are potentially one terrible decision away from being in a position we don't want to be in. Look at all the layoffs that are happening right now, whether it's in tech because of AI, companies thinking that they can automate people. People are the greatest resource that we have. And that is, I hope, the takeaway from this episode. Check out Eric's podcast, Worker to Worker, on the At What Cost YouTube channel. And again, use these resources. And if there are any questions, leave them in the comments, and we will make sure to get you connected with what you need. Always support the labor movement. Thank you for watching. Eric, thank you very much. And we will catch you in the next one.